and welcome. My name is Ishikawa Sutton. I'm running this little workshop for Zcomm, designing engaging workshops and roundtables, tools for inclusive action-driven sessions. Thank you so much, Danica, Michael, Ryan, for inviting me today, and the Zcash Foundation. I really enjoyed pulling this workshop, this presentation together. And it was a good way to just think about all the tools that I've had over the years built up to run workshops. Next slide. So here's our game plan. For the first 45 minutes, I'll do this presentation. Then I'll have a little discussion with Ryan for 15 minutes, and we'll open up for Q&As for the last half hour. The objectives for this session is to share how to organize an impactful session, describe tools and tips for facilitation, and answer your questions, and maybe I can hear some of your best practices for facilitation. Next slide. So who am I and why am I here today? I've been facilitating meetings since my undergrad days at UC Santa Cruz. I was part of a Tech for Social Justice program that was essentially teaching undergrad students and co-sharing tips on building websites and installing Linux, using databases for nonprofits to be more effective. And I was leading that program. And so I would facilitate a rowdy group of undergrads to make sure that we were on the same page. It was also a student-run program, so we actually were making consensus decision-making. So I've been doing this for a long time. And from that, I graduated and I worked at the Electronic Frontier Foundation for 5 years, fighting trade agreements that had terrible copyright and access to knowledge issues. That's what the A2K is, access to knowledge. That's the inside logo, inside word speak for that movement. And also how trade agreements were also undermining privacy laws and enabling big tech to share information needlessly and with no oversight. So I was doing that for 5 years. There was a lot of conversations between various digital rights groups and consumer rights groups, and we were all having to discuss what our shared strategy was on releasing shared statements. And so there was many meetings between people who were aligned, but maybe not always aligned. So that was always tricky, but really fruitful when people can align on a vision and agree on a strategy. Then after EFF, I have been an organizer, writer, and editor. I worked on a community network in Oakland, building anti-corporate ISP Wi-Fi network in the Bay Area, and have been an editor of a magazine called COMPOST, which is a digital commons digital magazine, as well as teaching decentralized web at Gray Area, which is a arts venue and education center in San Francisco. And all of these threads have just been tied together through, I think, a common thread, which is tech, social solidarity economics, and digital commons. And this has culminated into what I do now with the Internet Archive, which is the DWeb or decentralized web project. Next slide. So DWeb. DWeb is a network that connects people, projects, and protocols to build a decentralized web, a web that is private, reliable, secure, and open. Next slide. We have nodes around the world. So I think this is a little bit out of date, but we have between 12 to 15 active nodes at any given time, from Shanghai to Bangalore, all over the US, Perm, Prague, Berlin, of course. And these groups are not technical nodes, but human nodes of people who meet together in person and talk about how to decentralize power over our network infrastructure. And that comes across everything from community networks and internet service providers to distributed storage to social media networks and now AI. And people come together and talk about how to strategize, how to fundraise, how to find collaborators to build these tools, alternative network technologies that can replace and be better for us as people online. Next slide. And this came out of first a meetup that happened in 2016 at the Internet Archive building in San Francisco. If you squint your eyes, you can see next to that banner in the front is on the right side is Tim Berners-Lee, founder of the World Wide Web, Brewster Kahle, founder of Internet Archive, of course, and I think Matthew Hodgson of Matrix is in there somewhere. And so this meeting was bringing together people who are really thinking about how to build alternative network infrastructure back, wow, I guess 10 years ago now. And since then, we've been meeting almost every year. Next slide. We've transitioned from that type of conference or summit style to meeting outside. So in 2019, we met for the first time at this mushroom farm about an hour south of San Francisco. And the idea was that it was kind of Burning Man meets Chaos Computer Camp meets, RightsCon kind of conversation about the future of the internet and how to build technologies and alternatives to what exists today. And next slide. And this has led to now our fifth camp that's happening this summer in Germany at this venue called Alte Hohle, which means tall hell in German. It's happening July 8th through 12th. And we bring people who are working on art, mesh networking, public AI, open social networks, how to fund open source technologies. And we have a mix of workshops, talks, roundtables. It's family friendly, so people bring their families. And we will have a 24/7 hour hacking tent. It's kind of like CC Camp, which is the largest hacker camp in the world, but much smaller and focused on decentralizing power over the networks. And it's only about 700 people, not I think 6,000 people that Chaos Communication Camp brings. Next slide. And yeah, so this is about the size, and we think that meeting in person outside is such a good way to just build lasting relationships and have those conversations you can't have through this medium, through online chats. And I think it's been a really amazing launch point for many projects in our ecosystem. And next, our community is our framework is our DWeb principles, which is a series of 5 overarching principles, such as technology for human agency, mutual respect, distributed benefits, and empowering people, and ecological imperatives. And you can read all of those. I'll share them in the Discord chat after the session. And I hope you resonate with them. Next slide. And so really quickly, so as I mentioned, we have these meetups, these in-person camps that happen almost every year. I am also running virtual meetups every month. We have one this Thursday, actually, about peer-to-peer and mesh technologies. I'll also share that in Discord afterward. And we have our DWeb node network, which I mentioned. There was just a camp in Brazil that happened this past weekend. There's a DWeb camp Cascadia happening this summer. I believe it's the last week of July. That's right outside of Vancouver, Canada. We have our network communication, so newsletter, website, Matrix, Discord, and socials. And you can follow all of our events at dweb.events, which is where all of the things that are happening within the ecosystem is posted. And we'd love to see you in any of these spaces if you're interested in DWeb. Next slide. And these are the ways to stay connected. And I'll share those links to Discord and Matrix in Discord as well. All right, now on to the actual presentation. Next slide. All right, designing engaging workshops. So this is an overview of what I'll be talking about for the next 35 minutes or so. Why does this matter? The types of goals, objectives, and workshops that you might see and that you might want to try as you facilitate sessions. Some of the necessary components that you will need to consider when you are facilitating a workshop. Some of the main facilitation roles that you want to make sure you're covering when you're organizing. and some of the difference between virtual versus IRL in-person meetups that you're organizing. So why does this matter? Uh, well, this is my personal opinion, of course, but participatory conversation is very valuable. If you are thinking about any type of consensus decision making, if you're trying to bring people together to agree on anything, having people be in a room, be able to listen to each other respectfully, maybe be in disagreement, but come to some landing points together. That is, I believe, really at the root of bottom up, revolutionary power. And and I think being a facilitator is a really powerful role where you can be a facilitator for that type of listening and sharing and agreement that is, as you can probably see on any type of online platform today, might seem very impossible, but it does happen a lot. And facilitators are really, really important in playing that role um, to make that happen in a nice, fun, hopefully, at least fun, but hopefully a constructive way. And I really say this, facilitators should make easy discussions easy and difficult discussions doable. So first things first, what is the objective of the workshop or roundtable? It should be clear that this session that you're organizing is something that fits into a broader goal for the group of people that you're working with. So I always personally have to look up the difference between goals and objectives, but goals is like the overarching mission, right? What you're trying to achieve in a few years, maybe a year. And the objective is the achievable piece step towards reaching that goal. And so what is it that you're trying to do in this meeting to reach that overarching goal of the people that you're convening for this workshop or discussion? Two, when and how much time do you have? This is really key. I know that many workshops that I do is international, so I always have to think about time zones. There are some really good time zone apps out there that is really key to me. I actually just have it a open tab constantly. There's one called When to Meet, which is really nice. But thinking about how much time do you have? What are you able to achieve in that time you have is really key. Where is it? So you want to think about whether it's virtually or in person. So virtually, if you want to think about what is a more private or secure platform that you want to use. Personally, my virtual meetups, we always do it on Zoom, and we also do some strategy meetings on Zoom. But of course, that doesn't fit into some people's threat model. They don't feel safe on Zoom, so maybe you want to use a self-hosted Jitsi, or there's another one called Big Blue Button, which can also be self-hosted. There's also some providers of Big Blue Button that you might want to try if you trust them. So thinking about where do people feel safe? I think particularly in the Zcash context, thinking about, yeah, the tools that you're using virtually. And of course, in person as well. You want to make sure everyone feels comfortable, is able to arrive well and easily to a place. So you want to do it somewhere central, make sure there's chairs, make sure there's bathrooms, things like that. And that's something you really want to think about. Who should be in the room? So sometimes the most effective conversations are the three key people that should be there discussing this topic. Obviously, if there's less people, it's less complicated to facilitate usually. But sometimes you want it to be broad and you want to, harvest as many ideas from as many brains as possible that you can get to show up in person or virtually. And so think strategically with your organizing partner, or if you're the main facilitator organizer, who should actually be there? How is it going to be a dynamic but productive conversation based on those invitations? And five, what do participants need to do to prepare? So you don't want to, saddle people with like 10, 20 pages of readings, but you also want to make sure that people are on the same page about what's happening. So it's key to make things really concise, easy to read. I always send a agenda before a meeting, and this is exactly what's happening. This is where to show up. This is what to expect, and something really brief that gets people prepared. Objectives. So, as I said, the objectives should fit into the overarching goal of the group. Make them very clear at the beginning of the session, or even ideally before you're all meeting. And also, participants should shape the objectives, the outcomes, and the agenda. So this becomes at least a week or 2 week lead up project, right? Where you're thinking about all those questions that I just went through: when, where, who, and then talk to the participants and say, okay, this is the agenda, this is what we're trying to do, and allow people to give feedback if they have the time, to make sure that they feel included, obviously, but then also to just make sure that the meeting is more productive. When people are participating, then they're able to understand, okay, I'm showing up to this event and this is what my intention is. They get in the right headspace, and you can be a lot more productive that way. Next slide. Types of objectives. So your meeting could be a brainstorm. So maybe this is something where everybody's showing up, you have an idea for a project, or you have a something that you're trying to achieve, and you say, this is the thing, give me all of your ideas for how this could go well. Obviously, you want to structure it as much as you can. So maybe you might want to say, like, what is the timeline for this project? Who should we reach out to? Who should we rely on to take on this project, if that's a question that needs to be answered. So brainstorm is really harvesting ideas from the group. Feedback. So you might have an idea or an approach or a document, and receive live feedback. This is obviously a situation where you want to share the document or idea or approach before the meeting so that people can prepare their ideas. And the DWeb principles that I mentioned earlier, I was one of the stewards of that. And my co-partner on that project, we just created a principles document, and then we just had everyone like tear it to shreds, which was the approach. We wanted people to have something to work with, but then obviously make it better. And so having a live feedback session is actually really productive, I would say. Sometimes when you send something out to the ether and say, hey, do you have ideas on this, or do you have feedback? Sometimes people just don't have the time or don't make the space. But when they're in person, or at least present, they can really give you some of that really valuable feedback. Learning. So the objective could be that you're just learning from each other. So that could be lightning talks. It can be a panel. The virtual meetup I'm doing on Thursday is 3 lightning talks of people who work on peer-to-peer mesh technologies. It is really explicit that that is the goal. And at the same time, though, people are able to chime in on the chat, ask questions, and for the panelists to ask questions of each other. So there's a lot of different ways you can structure that learning to happen. Strategy. This is a really big one. So obviously, if there's a overarching goal, having the objective of just aligning on that goal, aligning on the objectives and the approach, and leaving that meeting with clear next steps, which I'll go into next, I think is one of the most productive ways to meet in person, or to have people present in the same space. So the types of workshops, there's dozens of types of workshops. I haven't even done all of these. I've participated, for instance, in this fishbowl. So the fishbowl is where you have a group of people in the middle of the room, if that's in person, or it could be virtually. You have like a panel of 4 people, and they're in conversation with each other. Everyone else listens in. There's a closed style of fishbowl where those 4 people or 3 people, however many number is like the panelists, they remain there for the whole time. Or you could have an open fishbowl where one of those seats is open. And so that means that one person can jump in to join in that panel. But then that means that if one person joins, one person has to leave. And this is a way for people to watch a smaller group of people kind of like brainstorm or talk through something, but then also be able to actively participate if it's a larger group. I've been on a panel of this, but I haven't personally organized it. But there's a lot of great resources for organizing fish bowls. Of course, there's breakout groups where you might meet initially as a big group, and then you break people off into small groups based on things that they're interested in, or you could just mix it up and assign people to different breakout groups. I've done both. Um, a big group discussion is you just facilitate a large group of people to talk through something. So you're, having people raise their hand, take stack, which I'll talk about a little bit later. A round table is where everybody's sitting around a table and everyone's talking. This is also really important for a facilitator, make sure that people aren't talking over each other, all of that. Panel discussion. This is similar to a fishbowl without as much of the interaction. I'm sure a lot of you have seen panel discussions where, you might have a few people in the front of the room or featured on the screen, and they're talking about something and you're just able to raise your hand and ask questions. Unconference, which unfortunately I don't have the time. It's a whole other approach to facilitating a conversation. And there's many people with their own styles for facilitating unconference, but that can be really powerful for getting people to have emergent ideas. So the idea of unconference is anybody in the room can propose an idea for something that they want to talk about, and then people can essentially go to that group and just start talking about it. So that means that there doesn't need to be a pre-schedule for events or a conversation. People show up and there's a process for organizing people into the groups to have a conversation that they want to have. And again, there's great online resources for that, which I can also share online. And yeah, this is just skimming the surface of the different types. The necessary components. So I'll go into depth to each of these: agenda, ground rules, notes, next steps, and follow-up. Let's start with agenda. So ideally, participants shape the agenda, as I said. Make sure that as a facilitator, you might either be somebody who is part of the organization that is shaping the goal or the objective of the meeting, or maybe you're a facilitator that's been kind of tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, can you help facilitate this conversation, even though you might not be the active participant in the group. And that's kind of, ideal, because then you're not, wanting to like raise your hand and participate as somebody in the group. You're able to kind of have a zoomed out view of how the conversation is happening. And share the agenda ahead of time. That's really important to make sure people know what's coming. And as a facilitator, you want to make sure that the agenda culminates to that outcome that has been agreed upon. And a rule of thumb for me is if it's longer than 1.5 hours, whether virtual or in person, I always schedule a bio break, go get water, go to the bathroom. 5 minutes is fine, depending on how intense the discussion is, maybe even 10. So people can kind of just like ruminate and think about what's being talked about. But yeah, it's important to have those breaks so that people don't get burned out and they can have more stamina for these hands-on conversations. Next is ground rules. So ensure people respect each other and their opinions. Usually people share a code of conduct. I always do. Um, it's important for people to be challenged, but not feel unsafe. So it's really important that I think particularly in person, but also virtual spaces, that there isn't any kind of harassment happening. That could just be, bullying or, something else, but you want to make sure that people feel safe to speak up and feel safe to participate. And so at least for our DWeb events, we have um, a code of conduct, which I'll share in the next slide. But I think it's important to have a code of conduct in both virtual and in-person meetups. And I like this rule: speak 1/10 of the time. So 1/10 means, let's say there's 10 people. I want to try and speak 1/10 of the time in that group. And so that, trying to say that, obviously that doesn't happen perfectly, and that's fine. But you want to make sure that people who are maybe more introverted or shy feel encouraged to speak, and to also make sure that people who tend to dominate conversations to kind of think about how much space they're taking up. The next slide is example code of conduct. And as you can see, we have an email that people can email if something happens, and to report it. So I always share these in all of my meetings that I do with DWeb. Next. Notes. Notes are very important. You want to make sure that there's a prepared notes document before your meetup, so that there's both a structure, and you are able to kind of encourage the note takers to capture the ideas and the thoughts that people had in the conversation. And it doesn't have to be every single thing that everybody said, but you want to make sure that the highlights or the key points have been harvested, particularly in the case of breakout groups, because as a facilitator, you can't be everywhere all at once. And you want to make sure that all of those really fruitful conversations are elevated, and that you can, again, harvest some of those ideas and thinking that people had in those conversations. So you can also record if that's available, but I think that isn't always the most efficient way to capture what happened, because then somebody has to watch that recording or listen to that recording. So it's really ideal to have a notes document prepared beforehand. Next steps. If it's a strategy session, you really want to make sure that the session is left with what actually happens next, right? If you don't have that, then you have to have another meeting where you say, oh yeah, what did we talk about again? What did we agree on? Who was that person that said they were really excited to do that thing? So if it's a strategy session, really, really make sure you have time on your agenda to think about what happens next. That could be assigning action items to somebody. Ideally, have a deadline for those action items. When is this going to happen? And also, who is going to follow up on all these things? It could be you as a facilitator, or it could be somebody else in the organization who is going to follow up on those action items. And follow up. You want to make sure to thank your participants, thank the hosts, thank everyone involved. You want to send the notes, the recording if you have one, and those next steps. And if it's a overarching organization that's hosting it, then how to stay involved and any related events so that people can stay connected and in the loop. All right, roles. I'm going to take a little water break. All right, these are some of the crucial roles in facilitating a workshop: a note taker, a timekeeper, and facilitator. And these darker green ones are follow-up person, hosting organization, or participants. So these are really key roles, obviously participants, but I just wanted to name that these are crucial roles that you can assign. And I won't be talking about each of these in depth. I just wanted to name them on this slide here. So note taker. Yeah, so it's self-explanatory, but they capture what's being said in the group. It's someone who might not want to participate as much in the conversation so that they can focus on what other people are saying instead of, you know, also trying to digest and respond to what's being talked about in that session. Depending on the size of the group, you want to have 1 to 2 note takers. Especially 2 note takers is better if those note takers want to participate in the conversation. And yeah, it's crucial for the takeaways, the follow-ups, the action items. And so really try, even if it's just day of, what I do often when I do breakout groups is I say, okay, in that breakout group of 4 people, who's going to be taking notes? And I have them raise their hand and I have them open their laptop or, you know, get that notepad or whatever. Um, or send them the notes doc that you prepared, which I talked about in the last slides, and have them be ready so that they can do it. Timekeeper. It can be the same person as a facilitator, especially if it's a very hands-on or intensive event. It's better to have someone else be the timekeeper. So, you know, you can do it yourself. When I have had to do it myself, I just use my phone timer. That's always really helpful. Um, Lately, when I have people go around the room to introduce themselves, I did this recently at a meetup in Internet Archive Europe, where we had about uh, 40 people talking, or what? No, it was at Seabase in Berlin, where I just wanted everyone to just quickly introduce themselves. I just did a timer and I had a bell. Every time they're up, I rang that bell and I was like, you're done. Because when you do that type of round robin, you know, introduction, people can talk a little bit longer than they need to, and that can really stack up. So timers are your best friend. All right, most importantly, the role of facilitator. So what is a role? You're holding the space, you are welcome, you're attentive to what everybody is saying, the vibe and energy of the room. And I think part of that is thanking everyone who has been involved. You can do it at the beginning or the end or both. You want to encourage everyone to participate. So while you are facilitating, you want to be observant about who is speaking, who's not speaking, and you want to keep the energy up and warm. You want it to be not a slog or a painful experience for anybody as much as possible. So you want to go in there, be that kind of cheerleader, I guess, of the conversation. Like you are like, okay, we can do this, guys. This is something that we need to talk about. Let's get through it. And just your energy as a facilitator can really, really help that conversation going. Speak clearly and assertively. I think I'll talk about this later, but if you have any instructions for the group, be very clear about what you're asking them to do. If they're confused, then it kind of falls apart, right? So you want to make sure beforehand, you know, read what you're going to say in terms of the instructions and make sure that you're clear on what you're asking everybody to do. And of course, keep an eye on the agenda, make sure that you're staying on track on the objective of the meeting. Oh yeah, so as I said, give clear action-oriented instructions. So when you're saying, okay, guys, we're all going to go to this Miro board and we're going to do 10 minutes of quiet ideation, you're going to put those digital sticky notes up into the Miro board and you're going to say, why are we doing this? We're saying this, we're doing this ideation session so then you can all just focus, think about your ideas in your own mind, and then we can talk about them as a group. I love this example, like we're moving into our next activity. I want everyone to individually write down their top 3 ideas. This will ensure we get everyone's unfiltered thoughts before we discuss them as a group. So something like that makes it very clear both what you're doing and why, so that people feel invested in the activity. While the session is happening, keep asking yourself, like, are we on track here? Are we actually doing what we're supposed to be doing for this time that we have? And if not, you can use tricks like, let me try and capture where we are in the conversation and summarize what people have been saying. You can say, let's pause for a moment on this topic and see if we can think about how we can take action on this. There's all kinds of ways that you can do this. And I think particularly the Zcomm facilitators told me that this is an international audience. And I think as somebody personally, I am from California, and I am half Japanese and half white Californian. I obviously have a certain culture around how I think I can interject and how I can facilitate this type of meeting, but that's really going to be different based on your cultural context, language, everything else. So these are just ideas for ways that you can shift a conversation, which I understand is different based on where you are. And on that note, interjecting is really important as a facilitator. Don't be afraid to interject or in other words, interrupt people if there's somebody that is dominating the conversation. So you can say, sorry to interject, but I'd like to open the floor to other comments, or, thank you, person, for your ideas. Wondering if other people have thoughts or questions to share. I often will actually even put someone on the spot if they haven't said anything and say, hey, do you have anything to say? And I would say that when I do that, when I actually name a person who hasn't said much, usually they say something, and it's always really helpful actually, because sometimes the person who's quiet and listening in the corner, they're really receptive and they're thinking and they're observing what's happening, and they have something really valuable to share. So I really try and do that. And of course they can always just say no, 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 I'm listening, and that's fine. But I think including people is really important, to make sure you have everyone participating. And this hand raising, taking stack, so these are different ways of making sure that people are talking. So hand raising, like in Zoom, you can have people hand raise, or in person. Taking stack means you take what's the word? You number who has raised their hand in the order that they raise their hand. So you can say, okay, that person raised their hand first, so then we will go in the order that they have raised their hand. Sometimes you can shift the order if, obviously someone's like, I actually want to respond directly to what that person said. You can make an exception for those people. And round robin is where you just have everybody go around sequentially and share something. And that's also a really good way for everyone to participate. So in summary, as a facilitator, you're a guide. You're not a presenter. So really remember that if you are really invested in the outcome of your session, maybe you shouldn't be the facilitator. You should ask maybe somebody else to be the facilitator, because if you have a lot of ideas to present, you might steer the conversation towards that, and instead of just try to hear everybody in the room that has their ideas and their inputs. So whenever you're a facilitator, you want to make sure that you're balancing between jumping in and using some of those tools of interjection, and pausing the conversation, but sometimes you just want to let the conversation breathe. So it's really, really key that you're listening and you're observing the dynamics in the room and being present to what's happening. And so I think this is something that is something only currently a human can do. I don't think AI can do it quite yet. We'll see in a couple of years maybe, but it's really important for, yeah, as a facilitator, it's a very like emotional job, right? You want to make sure that people are happy, are having fun, are being listened to, and that's really, as this person that is being the observant kind of nexus, the person holding the space of that conversation, that you're able to make everyone feel good and welcome and want to participate in that conversation. So these are just some of the links I found that I resonated with, that either have different approaches to what I shared today. Um, some of the quotes that I shared earlier came from these last two links that I'm sharing, remotesparks.com, which I really liked how they frame some of those conversations. And really, this is something that you'll only get better by trying and try and just reflect after a facilitation, like, okay, how could that have gone better? Maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. And that's really the only way that you're going to get better, because it's also that it's dependent on the context of the people as well. And one more actually. So virtual and IRL. I feel like through this presentation, I've talked a bit about some of these differences, but for a virtual meetup, you want to do intros from everybody with less people. If you have a chat, I usually just have everyone introduce themselves in the chat. Breakout groups, if there's a lot more people, if you want to have an experience where people just feel a little bit more connected, you can send people out into breakout rooms and have people chat maybe for 5 minutes even. An icebreaker question. So anything like, what have you been reading recently that you resonated with? Or, where are you calling in from? What's the weather like? And that's just a good way to ground people, especially if you have an international audience, to kind of elevate the fact that people are coming from different contexts. Miro and other participation tools are really key to having digital post-it notes, allowing people to participate in the notes and structure. There's a lot of different templates for Miro. So if you are trying to have a certain type of conversation, use Miro for that. In person, as I said, quick intros, use that timer, use a bell or a clap or something to make sure people aren't talking too long. Again, icebreaker question or a stretch is nice. Like doing stretches to get people to just kind of like warm up their body, feel more present. It's kind of amazing with just a simple body stretch that with the effect that can have. For the space that you're in, make sure at the top of the meeting you say, okay, here are the bathrooms, here's where to get water. Ideally, you have snacks for people, and physical note taking. So if you're doing things like an ideation session, you want to have like a poster paper with post-its, pens, notepads. That kind of thing can be really helpful, especially if you're trying not to have people get distracted by their Discord notifications. It's nice to just have people close their laptops and be present. And but be able to do that, you want people to be able to still take notes. So think about what types of resources you have for note taking. I think that's it. So questions for me. Again, I've been doing this for a while, but there's many things that I'm always learning as I facilitate. So what are strategies that I might have missed? How do these approaches differ based on the context? And we'll kick it off from there. Thank you so much for coming today. I will, I think, now be joined by Ryan shortly. Hi, Ryan.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, Mai. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation. I really enjoyed it. I was taking a whole bunch of notes, and then I forgot that I'm going to be actually asking questions, so I started writing down some questions. So there's some really cool chat going on in the Discord. I have kind of some stuff that I want to ask you specifically. I love the connection to DWeb Camp and DWeb that you led with on this. DWeb is a very interactive experience. The workshops, the sessions that go on, it kind of ranges through all these different styles that you were talking about, and they sort of pop up spontaneously sometimes. So it's a really cool opportunity. And I kind of want to lead with that. Like you pointed out your IRL versus virtual sort of from a facilitator perspective, but do you have a personal preference as a facilitator in leading one or the other?
Ooh, I mean, it's always better to be in person, right? You're able to then just have those like side conversations, you get to know each other on a deeper level. But I would say that as someone, I'm based in LA, my team is international, the work that I do is international, especially with this camp happening in Germany. It's always virtual. So, I've adapted and but I think you can make it fun and you can make it interactive. And I know that from some of the facilitation I've done that even on a virtual scale, you can have some really meaningful connections made. And I think that's done when people are able to talk like one-on-one or in a small group. So yeah, I mean, obviously IRL is better. It's more fun.
Yeah, totally agree. And this is a great lead into the first question, which coming from Dismad, what is the most rewarding thing as a workshop creator, and what drives you to keep building in this space?
What is the most rewarding? To me, it's when I mean, obviously, it feels good when people already agree with each other, and then they're like, "All right, we agree with each other. Let's do this," right? And it's very easy to have a conversation, but it's obviously more rewarding when there's people who disagree or like come into the workshop a little apprehensive, like, "Why am I here? Are we even going to accomplish anything?" And then by the end of the session, they're bought in and they have contributed things. People who might not totally agree ideologically on something are able to agree on something. Those moments have been the most rewarding for me is to be able to identify the things that people have in common, the visions that they have in common, and be able to like elevate that. And I think, that's definitely like challenge mode, right? When uh people are coming in like not sure why they're there or like, yeah, like maybe kind of pissed off that they're there maybe sometimes, but then at the end they're like, okay, actually we can move together, right? And we can do something together. So that's been definitely the most rewarding. And I would say that's the same for the second part of that question. That is what keeps driving me. In this day and age, like it's so easy to disagree and to feel pissed off and critical and like, oh my gosh, like can anyone agree on anything anymore? But um, when I have those moments and when I see that happening in other spaces where people come together and agree on something, it's like, okay, this is how we build a better world. There's all things that we can agree on some basic level that we can take care of together. And so yeah, that's what keeps me going.
It's really great because, like, towards the end of your presentation, it kind of occurred to me, I wrote down a note here that anyone who leads or organizes calls for their team should really watch this presentation because what you're talking about is really like how to facilitate any kind of call, like keeping people interested, getting people involved, participating, forming these connections, and like getting people to step outside of their kind of their biases and their prejudices or preconceived ideas and coming together to work on a common problem. So I think that's really valuable.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually just came out of my team meeting, which I always facilitate every week before this presentation. And I always share the agenda beforehand. As a facilitator, I also, if I want to contribute something, I try and raise my hand in Zoom to contribute so that I don't feel like I'm dominating the conversation. So it is, yeah, it's really important to use some of these tricks, even at a simple like team meeting.
That's a really good point about the facilitator also being a participant. And like if you're having a roundtable discussion, then you mentioned this the n number of people speak one nth of the time. And I really like this. It's difficult to accomplish. And Danica actually asked a question that's kind of related in the Discord. How do you manage group dynamics to ensure balanced participation? So a few voices don't dominate, but quieter participants are put on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, the round robin. So if it's a small enough group, you can just have everyone share something. But also those interjections. Don't be afraid to interrupt somebody who is talking a lot and say, just be honest. Say like, hey, I feel like I really like your ideas, or your ideas are valuable. Be affirming. because usually people who participate a lot care a lot, right? So it's not like they're necessarily just trying to crowd out other people. They just have a lot of ideas. So you want to say, your ideas are really valuable, be affirming, but let's try and hear from other people in the room. And then, as I said, like call on people specifically um, in the space who hasn't said anything. Um, or make sure that people are raising their hand, taking stack, and making sure that if you, and the thing is about raised hands is if that person is speaking a lot, you can say like, okay, we've heard from you a lot. Let's go to these other people, and then you can do it in a way that's not rude. So there's some of those tricks, taking stack, round robin, hand raising, that can really help with that.
Yeah, like being organized, you mentioned like sharing the agenda and being prepared. I love the idea of having a like a ideation session before the workshop even where people can participate in the design of the workshop. And I think that there's a lot of potential there. And between all of this stuff, there's also like it's a lot of participation requirements, responsibilities for the people who are participating so that they get the most out of it. I think, and you like you mentioned note takers. I think it's also super important. Do you have any tricks to getting people to take notes? Because I find it very difficult to kind of get started with a new group.
Oh, interesting. Um, hmm. Usually I'm able to find someone to take notes, always. There's always that person that likes documenting. I personally, if I'm not a facilitator, I like taking notes. It helps me listen, particularly if I'm not wanting to or needing to feel like I need to contribute as much. Um, but yeah, that's a hard question. I think usually people are down to do it. If not, you just have to assign somebody. Say like, all right, you're doing it. You have a laptop, or who has you say like, who has the best handwriting? Okay, you're doing it if it's like physical paper, right? So yeah, you just gotta make sure someone's doing it, because otherwise, I mean, unless you want it to be, a private conversation that doesn't have notes, that's very fair, and you don't need a note taker for that. But for anything that you want to ensure those ideas and everything continue on to the next conversation, or the goals of the meeting, that yeah, you select somebody. And as a facilitator, I think you have power to force someone to do it because it's important.
Yeah, and it's not just note takers too. Like these workshops, they're really at their best when people participate in all sorts of ways and people bring their own perspectives and thoughts to it. Do you have any tips for how to, if you're having like, if you're leading a particularly kind of quiet workshop, do you have any tips for getting people to participate?
Mm. Keep asking them questions. Ask questions that you think they'll want to jump in and respond to. Um, and again, also just call on people. I think a lot of us have been in, a lot of us have been in schoolrooms where you're suddenly called on by the teacher and you're like put on the spot, which is can be a little stressful, but you just keep doing that until someone says something. And usually once someone starts to say something, people will jump in and feel less maybe nervous to jump in. So, you know, uh, yeah, call on people, put people on the spot if they're being too quiet, and ask questions. You might keep needing to rephrase the question, but if you're already there for a reason, you'll already have two or three questions to pose to the group, to get them to start talking.
That's a really good point. Like as a facilitator, you can ask questions too. Like you're not there necessarily to teach. It's a workshop. And so like this interaction, asking questions is a great way to move that process forward in the participation. And it reminds me of a presentation at this Get DWeb event back in like 2015. There was a presentation about uncertainty And the person who was giving the presentation at first just said, I've never done this before, but I'm going to stand up here and we'll just see what happens. And they stood there for like 2 or 3 minutes, and you can hear people kind of moving around and not really sure what to do. And I'm live streaming it. And it was just like such an epic kind of example of that uncertainty. One of the questions was actually about how a new workshop creator can overcome social anxiety and shyness in public speaking. And what you're saying about asking questions, like ask the question. And then if you're especially shy or anxious, then you're going to want to like move on and keep going. But kind of like sitting in that uncertainty of like, just wait for people to talk, kind of
Mhm.
slow the roll, slow the pace.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, if you're, you know, a facilitator, you're trying to kind of not take up the attention in the room. Like you're holding the space, you're kind of the conductor or the guide, but you aren't, like you're not necessarily there to share your opinion. So it's actually, if you're shyer, it's like it's actually um not better, but yeah, I mean, you can be a really effective one facilitator because you're able to maybe take more of a backstage from what is really important, which is the participants. Um, so exactly right, asking the right questions makes other people shine. And so as a facilitator, you want to be prepared to do that. Um, and Yeah, there was one more thing I was gonna say, but it slipped my mind. Oh, I guess the other thing is I think when I was getting started too, is remember to breathe. I know that's obvious, I guess, but like just if you're starting to feel really anxious, like before I meet up, I actually sometimes feel really anxious before, standing up in front of people or whatever. And I just like maybe go to the bathroom and I just like just slowly breathe a couple times and say like, it's okay, I'm just gonna be present. I already have a plan, you know, people aren't here to look at me. If they're here to like talk about this thing. Like that is the point, right? So especially too if something gets heated or it's not going well. Like, gosh, if I was leading a conversation, it was quiet for 2 or 3 minutes, that would just like make my heart rate go up. So I would probably just start like meditating and breathing and just looking at everybody. But that it's amazing just how much like focusing on your own breath can help you yeah, like slow down and refocus.
Mhm. Yeah.
I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you a question, Ryan.
Oh, okay.
When
This
we
is
when we talked
unusual.
yes when we talked yesterday, you were telling me a little bit about how there's a bit more of a focus on facilitation and this interest in the Zcash community around this. Can you share your background in this and yeah and
Totally.
why this is becoming relevant for the Zcash community?
Yeah, it's absolutely relevant, especially recently. There have been community projects coming up that offer different people in the Zcash community the opportunity to lead workshops, to facilitate workshops. We started a workshop program last year with the ZKAV Club, and it was really loose and open. And we just put a form out and said, hey, if you want to lead a community workshop, then here are some topics that you can do. And we got some good ones, but what I think we're missing is all of this organization that you're talking about, like the work that goes before the workshop of the agenda and the notes and the research, having these three key people involved instead of it just being a single person talking to a live stream or an empty room. That's where these questions are coming from about how do we get people participating. And I think like the organization part is definitely key. So this year, the AV Club has a new workshops program, and people can earn Zcash for facilitating workshops. They can earn more Zcash if they have a group of people that are facilitating the workshops. So we're trying to like balance it out and support people in leading workshops that can be on like anything, pretty much. Something along the lines of like decentralizing power to the people, freedom tech, and especially privacy and self-hosted local first and these things. The Zcash en Español community, which really started in Venezuela and has now branched out because Spanish is such a useful language, such a used language. They have a workshop program built into the grant that they got at the beginning of this year as well, specifically for Spanish language workshops. And I would love to see some of the other Zcash communities also do workshops, programs like this. I think I've seen Zcash in Brazil talking about doing it. So like this information that you're giving is super valuable for organizing our community and growing our community, specifically in this like hands-on kind of way. It's leaps and bounds beyond what a community call is, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I guess the example that you gave at the top of that, someone proposing something, a workshop, and if there are people who are responding positively to that, that the person who's proposing it can say, hey, do you want to join me on this workshop? And we can kind of be a panel or do a fishbowl style where, the 3 or 4 core people, get the conversation going and then other people can jump in. I think that's it's a really great way, especially if there's maybe not necessarily a longer term strategy. It's just kind of like a brainstorming or like, hey, let's just talk about something that we're commonly interested in. It's I think a really nice way to get things going to just start with a conversation.
It's true. It doesn't have to be so formal. I think that a lot of a
Yeah.
lot of the blocking I've done on myself is with my own personal projects is like building it up to be this, like it has to be this big thing and it has to be perfect. And it's really never going to be perfect. We just do the best that we can and like know that there's people around to support in making this happen because the workshop is all about the people there and not about the facilitator or the tech or the platform or whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, but on the flip side of this, like we were talking about like shyness and how to get people involved and how to like enliven these workshops and really get people engaged. What about when people get too engaged? Like the code of conduct is an important and mentioned thing throughout DWeb. How important is it to have a code of conduct for workshops?
It's to me, it's very important. Whether it's in person or virtual, it kind of just shows that harassment isn't acceptable. And so, um, full stop, I guess, is like making sure that behaviors that disrupt everybody, that might make people unsafe, or, honestly, like if there's somebody who like you could just like DM somebody if someone's in a workshop and like if people know each other, maybe it could make somebody who could contribute something really valuable clam up or just leave, right? So it's really important to make sure that people are freely able to speak. And I think though that people conflate like code of conduct with like over policing. Like it's not policing, right? It's about holding a space for people to feel safe, and that's really important for everyone to participate, and it makes things more inclusive. I think particularly for people of identities who tend to be more bullied or challenged or interrupted, it's really important to have a code of conduct. And yeah, I think the main thing is it's not about preventing people from getting challenged, right? It's spaces should be a place where you can hear uncomfortable um, opinions or be challenged by other ideas, but should not feel unsafe. Uncomfortable is different from unsafe. So I think it sometimes it's a hard line to draw, but you know, if you can, having a another group of people that can kind of like hear people out to resolve tensions like that's really important. And so at DWeb camps, we always have a team of 3 people who are very identifiable in person, but then also, of course, like in these virtual meetups that people can write to that email and say like, hey, I experienced this, and having a place for that to happen. So then it's, if you don't have a code of conduct or team or contact, what, as I said, like maybe someone who could contribute something really valuable or you really want there might just disappear instead of you being able to have them in the room. So to me, it's really important to have some of those ground rules in place.
Yeah, it's true. It's really this point of inclusion. Like a code of conduct is not about exclusion, it's about inclusion, getting people to a point where they feel safe to participate in the workshop. It reminds me of this point of recording, like to get to back to the privacy point. If you're recording an in-person workshop, it changes the whole dynamic of the workshop. Same like for years, I've been trying to figure out how to do something that in person that preserves the privacy of the people in person, that and then online hybrid, full hybrid, where everyone feels comfortable and safe to participate. But that privacy issue raises these in the same way that a code of conduct would make people feel like it'll make people feel safe knowing that it's not being recorded, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And so it's really important. That's a great point. To say up front if something's being recorded, right? Whether that's in person or virtual. For instance, the virtual meetups that I do, I say up front that it will be recorded. And we also upload the chat afterward because people share a lot of links and there's a lot of Q&A and chatter that happens there. So, you know, you want to respect people's ability to participate without putting them in danger or making them uncomfortable in that situation. So yeah, it's recording can be a powerful tool, obviously, as you know, Ryan, but like, yeah, I think making sure that that's very clear, the terms by which the participants or the speakers will be recorded is really important.
Mhm. Yeah, so like what are some of the best ways to like get the right people, get the information about the workshop to the right people to come to your workshop? Like, do you have any advice there?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the context of the goal and objective of the thing, right? So, I'll just give an example. When we were pulling together our DWeb principles, it was like a year and a half process. We had different levels of engagement. So we had the phase where we were like, okay, we're going to talk about particularly the distributed benefits section. And so the distributed benefits section of the principles is kind of about like, how can open source technologies and DWeb technologies actually flow to the users of it, that it's not just being captured by the investors or the company, right? Which is exactly what we're facing today with all of our terrible tech platforms. And part of that thinking, at least for me, was like, oh, cooperatives, right? And the platform cooperative movement. So then we invited Nathan Schneider, who's a leading voice on cooperatives, to come share his ideas about what kind of wording we should use for that DWeb principle. So just like thinking through that, like, okay, what are we talking about today? Who are the experts that are able to give attention to this and reach out as soon as possible to have maybe a closed session like that. And we did a series of those sort of more closed sessions for the principals to say like, okay, how are we going to make the best version that we can before we then open it up to everybody? And so at that point, when we had a draft principle and we said, okay, we're just gonna open up to anybody who wants to give their ideas on this. We put it on social media, obviously, and said we are trying to crystallize what this movement is about. Come to this virtual meetup. Here's a form if you can't come to the virtual meetup that you can read it and give us like line by line feedback. So use all the channels that are at your disposal if you are doing a public thing. And use the keywords to try and get them to come. In my experience, direct email. If email doesn't work, DM them. If DM doesn't work, harass them on social networks and not harass. No harassment here, but you know what I mean? Like just ping them. And if they're like not responding, then they're too busy. It's fine. But use depending on how the curation of that workshop is happening, if it's a closed one or open one, be clear about who your audience is. Imagine your like ideal people in that meeting, and then think about how you reach those ideal people.
I think that's really great. Like, and also people forget stuff. you know, like you tell your best friend something and that you have doing an event in like some amount of time, and then they'll forget and you have to keep reminding them anyway. And then there's other people that aren't your best friend who are gonna like
Yeah,
definitely forget. Yeah, it's good to remind
absolutely.
people. Mhm.
Yeah, get it on their calendar. I think that's a huge one. But then if you also know, maybe it's a friend or someone, like send a reminder email before the meeting. I always would do that, and a reminder email with the agenda, and then say like, hey, this is a thing you have to prepare. That is always great. If you know that they are the most responsive on Signal, then Signal message them and say like, hey, like looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, even something like that, to make sure that some of those busier people are able to show up.
This also requires a lot of lead time before the workshop. What kind of timeline are you usually looking at? Like if you think of like you have the idea for a workshop, and then like how long until the workshop is done and you can pat yourself on the back and everyone learns stuff?
Oh, yes. I would say a month in advance is the best. In terms of reaching out to people, you should start reaching out to people ideally a month in advance, and then um, confirming the participants, sending out the calendar invite. Once I have a date and a time, I just send that to everybody who I know is coming, so that it's like in their calendar. Nothing else can get scheduled over it, ideally. Um, all of that. Sending the agenda at least a few days in advance, but a week in advance is best. And yeah, this is actually something I want to work on, is a timeline. I don't know if I've seen like a facilitation timeline like that, but that's generally like month in advance is ideal. I do know that actually for this session, I think Danica reached out to me like 2 months ago, and so it's been on my calendar, my radar for a while. So it's good to lock people down, especially if they're busy, and yeah, making sure that they're clear on when and where and how to show up.
Nice. So I want to like diverge a little bit because the questions that we have now have basically been covered, I think. If I'm wrong and you're watching and you're in Discord, then shout at me and say, "Hey Ryan, you missed my question." But I wanted to come back to a couple of ideas that are like, well, one that's really central to DWeb, and that is mesh networks. It's something that is like super exciting for me, and I think for you as well. So I want to like maybe get your like find out like what is the thing with mesh networks and DWeb like and then also you said anti-corporate ISP at one point in your presentation, and that caught my attention. So if you want to go down either of those paths, I would love to listen.
Sure. So, yeah, I guess my personal journey was after EFF and fighting these big trade agreements where essentially Hollywood, then big tech were using trade agreements to shove their like ideal laws through the back door, through trade agreements. And then, of course, the lawmakers in each country, even the US, has to say, like, oh, well, we signed this trade agreement. So now we have to pass this law to conform to this trade agreement. That's like pretty much what happens. I know I like am very simplifying the process, but I was just getting so disillusioned, and when I was thinking about like what is that, like what is the internet, like what is it fundamentally, and it's like people connecting to each other and sharing information or sharing memes or sharing things, right? I was like, I want to understand what people are doing to create alternative networks on the ground. And to me, and at that time, the net neutrality debate was really getting off the ground. There was all these like terrible policies that the FCC was trying to pass around what ISPs can do to throttle data or to censor data, like, and also like prioritize like Facebook versus other websites. And I obviously thought that was really terrible. And so, what's the alternative to that, right? Is we build our own networks. We have networks where a corporation or the state can't prevent me from sharing information with my neighbor. or with someone, across the city from me. And I think that's what's really beautiful about the potential of mesh networks is on a technological level, there's no choke points. I can directly send information to somebody who is geographically able to through a line of sight connection, through two antennas that doesn't have a building or a tree in between them, right? And so I think that's what's really fundamental to me and is close to my heart. And I guess in terms of like the DWeb network stack, is that like that last mile infrastructure, or like how do we literally connect to each other to pass bits to each other. But of course there's all the other different layers of that network stack, like the protocols that those antennas need to use to pass information. So that could either be over Wi-Fi, it could be over LoRa, which is long range, and some of you might have heard about Meshtastic or MeshCore, which are these new exciting mesh protocols that operate on LoRa bandwidth, which is different from Wi-Fi. Um, and but then of course there's open social networks. So like the Blue Sky AT protocol ecosystem is really exciting, that you can have different PDSs. I think it's portable data store, personal data store. That's right, personal data stores. And I think at every layer of the network stack, we can think about like, okay, how can people have more ownership over their data? How can they have more autonomy over the infrastructure that they rely on to connect with each other, either locally or internationally? And I think we can have that conversation at every layer. And I guess having worked on this for almost 10 years now or more, there's the technologies that are really exciting that enable this. But what's tricky is that a lot of it is a complicated people problems, and everything from like, how do you ensure that this very key open source project is supporting the developer, like the one lone developer that is like keeping this code maintained, right? And like like sure, that is kind of a technical problem, but it's also like a kind of a financial plumbing problem. Like a lot of people might recognize that that person's code base is really important, but isn't getting recognition, monetary recognition, to actually be able to support themselves. And I think that kind of also gets into this like, thinking around like what is public infrastructure really, in light of like it not being state public infrastructure, but like public infrastructure that we rely on, that's a commons, but we're not taking care of those maintainers and builders of these systems. So yeah, sorry, I kind of diverged in that conversation, but to me, like
That's perfect.
what's really tangible, one of the most tangible things about DWeb is like those mesh networks. How do we like actually connect physically to each other? And then all the things that can be built up on top of those physical connections that we have.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's autonomy, it's sovereignty. What you're talking about, you had mentioned the human agency and the importance of human agency in all of this. In Zcash terms, it's self-custody. It's the same as like local first. Like don't keep all of your data on some Amazon server. Keep it on a server at your home if you don't need it to be online all the time, or don't use like the main internet for some stuff. You can run a lot of things on local LAN networks. LoRa is awesome. Like MeshCore, a friend of mine got a MeshCore device here in Berlin, and he was showing it to me. And there's a ton of nodes around, and they can do like 64 hops or something like that through via secure scuttlebutt tech, which is also something that comes out of DWeb, which is well adjacent to DWeb anyway, which is great.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think yeah, the more that we think about what the problems are with big tech, we think about like what does it mean both organizationally and technologically, and those obviously feed into each other, right? Like the technical systems that we built, for instance, the way AT protocol is built, creates different affordances or different abilities for people to organize and build on top of that protocol compared to something like Twitter, right? Where they used to have open APIs. I actually, Jay Graber who I know used to try to built a event app on that, and then they closed their API, and then like it's like if we build systems that are open fundamentally, then we can actually build things that allow for local first self-custodial data for all these things that we want. But when we build these open systems too, though, it's harder to monetize, right? Like it's harder to capture people's data and sell it off. I think that's actually for the best, obviously. But when we're not having these economic systems, these business models based on just selling our data, for instance, then we really need to think carefully about, okay, then how are we supporting the people that are building these, in a, obviously in many of our cities and countries around the world, like our taxes are taken and then it goes towards paying for buses or trains or our phone networks or water, right? Without that system, how do we do something where we're actually able to maintain these shared infrastructures that we want to rely on, that we want to make sure is open, that is rights respecting, and all of that.
That's really so much of what DWeb is about. I think you really nailed it. For sure. And like this idea of roots and really like building a community and not depending on big tech to build the way that we talk to our community, the way that we send money to our community or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can learn from big tech what not to do. And it's a lot trickier to figure out what to do. But I think at the very least, we can see from, I like to say that like big tech is like our network infrastructure on steroids, right? Like we were able to see within a very short time span, like within a matter of decades, like fundamentally our relationship to each other, the way we connect like internationally has completely changed. Like being able to stream video, have like conversations like this, like was just literally not possible 15, 20 years ago, which is actually pretty insane. Um, but it was also possible because like immense amount of capital, right, went to flow into this, and it blew up really quickly. But at the same time, we know that these systems actually also don't aren't built with our best interest in mind. So I think like thinking about how do we maybe take what we know works, like maybe a Zoom like thing or something like Discord or all these things, but how do we do it in a way that puts our agency and our sovereignty, and our rights at the center of it, is really, really tricky. But I think there's so many ways that we can reimagine networks beyond what VCs or states or things put a lot of pressure to design these systems in a certain way in which we have less privacy, we have less rights on these platforms. And so yes, like DWeb is all about both talking about all these strategies, but also trying to support concrete projects that are building these alternatives. Like AT protocol, many of the folks that work on it, Brian Newbold, Paul Frazee, Jay Graber, met through DWeb. As you mentioned, Secure Scuttlebutt, a lot of those folks have been coming to DWeb from the beginning, Matrix, all of that. So that's really where we're having those conversations and really trying to get these projects off the ground.
Yeah, I highly recommend that anyone who's watching this check out DWeb Camp. Is it DWeb Camp is the URL? I know getdweb.net.
DWebcamp.org.
DWebcamp.org. So for that, check that out. The tickets just went on sale. I think they're going to sell pretty quick. So people should
our
definitely
early
get in
bird,
on that.
I need to check on this, but our early bird tickets are available for the next 2 weeks, and then they'll rise a little bit. So we just launched our tickets last week. Our CFP, we have a lot of exciting tracks this year. We have anti-authoritarian stack, public AI, solidarity tech, so how to design technology with communities, decentralized design, open social web. We have 10 whole tracks, and it's also a very family friendly event. Actually, we always have like between 20 and 40 kids up to 12 years old. We also have a teen track so that teens can learn how to DJ, maybe learn how to video with you, Ryan, and go on hikes and all that. So yeah, we really encourage you to come and bring your family. And this year, I really hope that we can have some kind of conversation with teens or kids and say like, what are your ideas for what you want the internet to be? Like they're the future and they are the most online. Like I feel like every year it's like more online than ever before. And it'd be really cool to get ideas from kids, how they think things could be different.
Yeah, what they think about privacy, like what they want privacy
Yeah.
on the online to be like when they're our age,
Oh
If
God,
they-
yeah. Especially some of these kids who have like millennial parents who like completely social media eyes their entire life so far, So yeah, like what does privacy mean for kids who I guess in a way like and didn't have any agency over that, right? And so yeah, I think that's really key.
Yeah. Yeah, they can get a sense of agency by going to DWeb Camp. All of these, basically everything you talked about is the vibe for DWeb Camp. Like it's all just these kinds of workshops of different styles. Some are just conversations, others are like more organized and formatted. It's really an opportunity if you're watching this and you think like this is cool information, but I want to see it in practice, then like go to DWeb Camp. That's
Yeah.
that's the call to action.
Yeah, it's so dwebcamp.org is the URL. And let's see. Oh, it's July 8th through 12th this summer, about an hour outside of Berlin. And yeah, it's gonna be a good time. It's our first time leaving California, so we're doing some things pretty differently, but I think in a great way. And a big reason why we decided to go to Germany was there's such a beautiful, thriving, alternative network hacking culture in Germany and in Europe overall. So really excited to bring what we've been doing and partner and cross pollinate with all the communities there.
Oh, I see something in the chat here. So the Zcash Community Grants is inviting a team of 2 to 3 individuals to represent Zcash at DWeb. If you're interested in this and you're watching, then submit the following information to grants@fpriv.org, fpriv.org. The total USD amount requested for your team, a brief summary of your team and the qualifications, and any additional information you'd like ZCG to consider. ZKAV Club is also inviting people to volunteer at DWeb Camp, and we have part of our grant that we got from Zcash Community Grants will go to supporting some active volunteers, participants. We can help out with your camp ticket and your cost, your food. And there are different opportunities if you can't afford a ticket, but you have to get in touch with people, reach out to people, reach out to ZCG, reach out to me, reach out to my or the DWeb team. They get involved. They're looking for volunteers and all of that also.
Absolutely. It's really exciting that that this community grant is here and that you're bringing your team. And we really love to see all your faces. Thank you so much for your time, Ryan, Danica, and Michael for this opportunity. And this has been really fun.
Thank you. Join the Zcash Discord and join DWeb Discord and Matrix.
Yes,
Join the
I'll share all
conversation.
those links in Discord after this. So stay tuned for that. It's in the green channel in the Zcomm thread.
Cool, cool. Thanks, Mai.
Thanks, Ryan.